The revised 2020 Nigeria's Appropriations Act of 10.81 trillion naira has been signed into law. President Muhammadu Buhari performed the constitutional responsibility occasioned by the impact of COVID-19 on the nation's economy. As the brief but significant event, the president promised that ministries, departments and agencies will receive not less than 50% of their amended capital budgets before the end of this month. State House correspondent Adam Sambu brings us the details.
The adjustment in the estimates of Nigeria's 2020 budget of sustainable growth and national development was in response to the sharp decline in the prices of crude oil in the world market, as well as the widespread disruptions in global economic activities due to the coronavirus pandemic.
The 2020 budget, which I have just signed into law today, underscores our administration's firm commitment to effectively contain the spread of COVID-19 and protect the lives and livelihood of our people. With these budget amendments, as well as our recently launched 2.3 trillion naira stimulus program, we are well positioned to safeguard the economy.
The revised 2020 budget of 10.81 trillion naira has an increase of 216 billion naira over what was initially proposed in the 2020 Appropriation Act. It is made up of 2.48 trillion naira for capital expenditure, 4.94 trillion naira recurrent, 2.6 trillion naira for debt service, and 2.9 trillion naira sinking fund.
Considering recent budget implementation challenges, I have directed that efforts be made to assure effective implementation of the Appropriation Repeal and Amendment Act 2020 in order to realize its laudable objectives. All ministers are to ensure that their ministries, departments, and agencies intensify capital project delivery efforts and fully cooperate with the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning to achieve the laudable objectives of the budget.
As at May 31st this year, only over 253 billion naira had been released for the implementation of capital projects. President Muhammadu Buhari is, however, assuring the nation that before the end of this month, all the ministries, departments and agencies will receive not less than 50% of their amended capital budgets.
I thank all Nigerians for their understanding and unflinching support, especially during these difficult times.
And the implementation of this will start immediately, probably from today. The efforts that we have made in this particular budget is to ensure that there are a lot of supports for individuals as well as businesses, especially the SMEs. And this will ensure that businesses are able to stay afloat and individuals are able to live a life that is meaningful. So I believe that this is a budget that we have gotten right. The implementation, I'm very optimistic, will be significant. We may not achieve 100%. If we can, why not? But I believe that we can achieve nothing less than 80% by the end of the year.
The National Assembly are rising to the expectations of Nigerians, partnering with the executive to deliver on services to the Nigerian people. And for me, that is responsibility, that is partnering in nation building, and indeed that is what they had been elected to do. And also we appreciate the relationship because they had also demonstrated in many ways than one that they are committed to serving the Nigerian people.
The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, is expected to provide details of the amended 2020 budget in the coming days. From the State House, Adamu Sambo, NTA News.
And joining us in the studio for some perspectives on the revised 2020 national budget is the development economist, Dr. Emeka Okengu. Dr. Okengu, you're welcome to NTA International.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Now, Nigeria's 2020 revised national budget assented to by the president. What are the implications for the economy coming at this time?
Well, the implication, if you call it an implication, I think I'd rather use the word, what are the major advantages The first big advantage is that you now have an economy that is going to be running on full throttle, on all, is going to hit the ground running. Because like you had the president say, it's unprecedented first that in the beginning of even the old budget, remember that from the first week of January, the Ministry of Finance has started making releases, to ministries up to the extent that about 253 or 258 billion had been released, in the capital component of budget. That had never ever happened before. And now the president is now saying that 50%, of all capital is also going to be released to MDAs. Again, that's also unprecedented. What that means is that if you may, the ministries, departments, and agencies are going to be very fluid. They are going to be liquid enough to begin to pursue their various, capital projects. And remember that capital projects connote infrastructure, and infrastructure is one way we can be able to get out of, both our economic doldrum and then, be able to face whatever headwinds that are ahead of us.
Okay, now the president also said, as you mentioned in your comments, that 50% of the amended capital budgets will be released to the MDAs before the end of this month. Now, how is that going to impact the economy?
Oh, greatly, greatly. I mean, the answer, like my lecturer will say, is in the question. Greatly, greatly. I mean, it's all about funding. It's all about, like the bankers will say, it's all about being liquid. What it means is that there is no MDA that is going to be complaining about the paucity of funds. They are going to be having funds to be able to pursue their programs. And remember that money answereth all. The moment you have that money and it is well applied, and in this case, we are not talking about, recurrent or personnel costs, which is already solidified. We're talking about, capital projects, which is where you have your infrastructure focus. So it is going to be, I don't know, I'm looking for the right word to use. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be just great. I think that's the right way to go, and it's simply a statement of we are ready, to be able to fight whatever outcomes that are going to be coming with this COVID. Because you see, what that also means is that you're going to have the private sector fully energized, to be able to support government efforts. Because the moment ministries, departments, and agencies, have funding, then they're able to pursue, their PPPs or their PPAs or whatever, partnerships that they have, with the private sector. And of course, with the subnationals. So it's a yes. It's the way to go.
Now, past experiences have us facing a situation where MDAs have low budget performance at the end of every year. Now that there is this assurance that they're going to get these monies before the end of this month, what advice do you have for the MDAs so that we have an effective implementation?
Well, the only advice I have for them is that, the president has fire in his eyes. He's not joking. Okay, so you get your money, because remember that, again, the Senate has said we're looking at 100%. I think it's achievable. Why wouldn't we do 100%? When we go into the plan of budgets, we don't plan it to succeed 80%. So what it means is that if you utilize your funds well, it simply means you can get more. So it's all about first, putting in what you might be able to call your implementation frameworks, your monitoring, frameworks, and then, your project development models. The moment you do this and then you pursue it with all the zeal, and I think from hearing from the Senate, it's obvious that everybody is also going to be, putting eagle's eye on the activities of the MDAs. I mean, we see what's coming out of the National Assembly in the past days, and you find out that, we have a reinvigorated National Assembly, if you may, that is more poised to be, part of the process of making certain that projects, money is allocated, are wage-lies, and projects are, run its proper course. So what my simple advice, I mean, I don't even need to give that advice. I'm certain that they are also ready and willing to be able to, pay back or repay the president, in his to show that they're excited and glad that he's been able to give them the push. Everybody's been waiting for this to happen. So I see a new Nigeria. I see a lot of hope. I see smiles in the faces of people.
We thank you very much, Dr. Okengu, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much for having me once again.
I've been speaking with Dr. Emeka Okengu, a development economist, on the 2020 revised national budget. Now, in another development, President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the suspension of acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Magu. The suspension is to allow for unhindered inquiry by the Presidential Investigation Panel under the Tribunals of Inquiry Act and other relevant laws. This is contained in a statement issued by the Special Assistant, Media and Public Relations, Office of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Dr. Umar Jibrilu Gwendu. The statement reveals that the President has also approved that EFCC Director of Operations, Mohammed Umar, takes charge and oversee activities of the Commission pending the conclusion of investigation and further directives in that regard. Now, the judiciary in Nigeria has been told to be sensitive to the damage being caused by the society and by corruption, while also being guided by the provisions of the law. This call came from participants at a virtual conference held to mark the 4th Africa Day of Anti-Corruption. Femi Okewu has that report.
The theme for this year's African Day of Anti-Corruption is fighting corruption through effective and efficient judicial system. And why not? More and more countries in the African continent are realizing that the fight against corruption only by the executive arm of government cannot succeed without a legal foundation and the authority of the law. And so, participants, one after the other, gave their inputs on how an effective and efficient judicial system can clean up the society of the menace of corruption. It was the chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, Professor Ite Sage, that fired the first salvo when he warned that with its over-reliance on technicalities, the Nigerian judiciary was portraying itself as being hostile to the fight against corruption. But other contributions pointed to the weak investigation and prosecution of corruption cases that make it inevitable for corruption cases to fail on trial.
Systemic corruption has weakened all of us, not just anti-corruption agencies. It's also weakened the judiciary as well. So if we work together, we can remove that disability in order to strengthen ourselves.
Of course, obstacles that have been mentioned, especially from the bench, is the fact that they are confronted with improper investigation, rush to prosecution, and then lack of skill on the part of the prosecutors and investigators.
So many justices of the Court of Appeal participated in the virtual conference, but it was the president of the court herself, Justice Monica Manson, that struck the chord when she made the comparison between crimes where investigation can go on for as long as 10 years, but trial concluded in 3 months, compared with her own crime, where investigation is taken only for about a few days, with trial running into years. That, she says, cannot augur well for the fight against corruption. In Abuja, Femi Okewu, NTA News.
Just coming in from the Twitter handle of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, indicates that an Egypt airline conveying 270 Nigerian evacuees and 2 Egyptian nationals has departed Cairo for the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport here in Abuja. Moving on, the Economic, Social and Cultural Council of the African Union has appealed for an end to the spate of insecurity in some parts of the country, as there cannot be any meaningful development without peace. This was at a press conference on improving security of lives and property in Nigeria. Adebola Brooksman Sunday has the report.
The issue of insecurity is a challenge being faced the world over. In Nigeria, the activities of insurgents, bandits and other criminals can also be felt in most parts of the country, leaving many dead and families separated. In line with the African Union 2063 agenda of having a peaceful and secured Africa, the Commission, in collaboration with a non-governmental organization, El Sadiq Foundation, organized a meeting with the aim of putting an end to insecurity, particularly in the northeast and west zones of the country.
We will pay attention to feedback mechanism electronically and a system review. The arrangement is intended to foster check and balance, ensure leakages of information on the plan operation are properly traced.
The African Union tagged year 2020 as Year of Silencing the Guns, creating conducive conditions for Africa's development. 7 years down the lane, the sound of guns are still loud in countries of member states.
The way that Boko Haram, there was a time that even within the FCT that one can move freely, but it's not the same as we speak right now. There was also a time that even the Kaduna Road, you can't even move, but it's not the same story. By the end of this year, can I assure you, we will make a tremendous impact and achievement.
Mobilizing to see security as everyone's business is one of the strategies mapped out by organizers. Adebola, Brooksland Sunday, NTA News.
Meanwhile, the federal government has approved a fourth evacuation flight for stranded Nigerians in the USA. A statement by Consulate General of Nigeria in New York, forwarded by Minister of Foreign Affairs, says only those who tested negative of COVID-19 2 weeks before departure date will be evacuated. The evacuation is scheduled for Tuesday, 28 July 2020, through Ethiopian Airline, intending evacuees without the stipulated test results or body temperature above 38 degrees centigrade or any symptoms suggestive of COVID-19 will not be allowed to check in. The Consulate General says all prospective evacuees that registered with any of the 3 Nigerian missions in the United States are to purchase their one-way tickets at the cost of $1,250 for economy and $2,800 for business class. And this is the news on NTA International. We take a short break now. We will be back after this message. Thank you for joining us again. Medics confirm first coronavirus case in northwest Syria, and the World Health Organization advanced team should be in China to probe into virus origin. Joyce Ometu has latest developments on the pandemic.
Advance team from the World Health Organization left for China for investigation into the origin of the coronavirus. WHO spokesperson Margaret Harris in a briefing said the 2 experts will work with Chinese scientists to determine the scope of the investigation. In the meantime, Hong Kong has announced closure of its entire school system from Monday after a spike in local transmission of COVID-19. The education minister made the announcement after parents were found among a cluster of new coronavirus cases. And Northwest Syria has confirmed its first coronavirus case, raising fears for a region where hospitals lie in ruins and camps overflow with people after nearly a decade of war. Reports say the patient is a doctor at a hospital near the Turkish border. And from Uganda comes the reports that coronavirus cases has exceeded 1,000. The country, which is among the least impacted in East Africa, has not recorded any death from the virus. As at 6 p.m., statistics by a coronavirus resource center in Johns Hopkins University show that 7,271,897 people globally are known to have recovered from coronavirus. 12,481,719 confirmed cases around the world, with 559,187 mortalities. Out of these numbers, Africa has so far recorded 546,436 COVID-19 cases and 12,532 deaths. In Nigeria, 30,748 persons have been infected, out of which 12,546 have recovered, while 689 people have died from the virus. And that's a global update on COVID-19. Thanks for watching. I am Joyce Ometu.
In another development, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, says all proactive measures have been put in place to manage the victims of flood in the midst of COVID-19, as well as effective response to the 2020 flood disaster across the country. Director General of the agency, Air Vice Marshal Muhammad stated this at a press conference on the 2020 flood preparedness mitigation and response. Ilyasu Aliakubu reports.
The 2020 flood predictions by the Nigerian Meteorological Agency shows that 102 local government areas in 28 states of the country falls within the highly probable flood risk areas, while 275 local government areas in 36 states, including the FCT, are within the moderately flood risk areas, and the remaining 397 local governments are placed on low probable flood risk areas. These predictions are expected to have severe impact on various sectors, which included agriculture, water resources, health, transport, and infrastructure. Based on this scenario, the Director General of NEMA is taking proactive steps to mitigate the likely impact.
Unfortunately, 2020 is going to be a year of an incident within an incident. With the country battling COVID-19 pandemic, managing a flood disaster will be a Herculean task. To this end, NEMA has taken the following steps as preparedness measures to mitigate the likely impact.
It will be recalled that the 2012 floods affected more than 7 million people, while that of 2018 affected more than 2 million people. In Abuja, Ilyasu Aliakubu, NTA News.
And the Nigerian military says some notable bandit leaders and several of their fighters have been neutralized in airstrikes executed by the air components of Operation Hadarin Daji in the Zamfara State section of the Kagara Forest. A statement from the Directorate of Defense Media Operations indicates this was achieved on 9th July 2020 after human intelligence reports stated some armed bandits had relocated with a large number of rustled livestock from the Sokoto State side of the forest and set up camp in the Zamfara State portion. Following confirmation, Nigerian Air Force fighter platforms engaged the location, neutralizing several of the armed bandits. Sources later confirmed that 8 bandit leaders were among the dead. The Defense Headquarters and the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar, have commended the feat. In sports news is next. Super Eagles striker Victor Osimhen describes his purported Napoli agreement deals as fake news.